This is Barbara Miller from Museum of the Moving Image. Welcome. I'm so glad to be with you guys again. Since mid-March, we've been out of the museum's building, where among many other things, we have an ongoing exhibition devoted to the work of Jane Henson. As part of our remote programming, we've had many conversations exploring Jane Henson's remarkable body of work, the puppeteers, designers, and others that brought his stories and characters to life, as well as his enduring legacy. Tonight's conversation is a bit of a departure of things we've done before, but I think it's one that engages Jane Henson's legacy in a really profound way. We'll be talking to 4 artists who brought stories to life on screen with live action puppets and have made works supported by Handmade Puppet Dreams, an organization founded by Jim's daughter, Heather Henson. Handmade Puppet Dreams encourages artists to experiment with live action puppetry through the medium of film and presents these works to a broad audience through a touring film festival as well as on Amazon Prime Video. Before we start, just a couple of things. We look forward to welcoming you to Museum of the Moving Image in person when we reopen. In the meantime, we'll continue bringing you events like this one and a lot of other great content. Please head over to our website, movingimage.us, to see what is in store. Some of you watching right now are members, hello members, or have been with us for various programs over the past few months. So welcome back. And if you are here for the first time, then welcome. And please consider joining our community as a member if you can. We provide many events for free with the hope that if you are watching, you'll make a donation to the museum in whatever amount you are able to. This will help bring you more events like this one, as well as equip us with the support we really seriously need to open our doors once it is safe to do so. If you can, please help out. So without further ado, I will briefly provide quick bios to the 4 artists that will be joining us this evening, and then I will welcome them all on to share the screen. Raymond Carr is an Atlanta-based filmmaker and puppeteer who stars in the Jim Henson Company series Splash and Bubbles. In addition, he serves on the board of Film Impact Georgia, which is a nonprofit organization designed to empower independent filmmakers. He's currently in post-production on his new film, Joyriders. Raymond's short film, Hitori, was made in 2014 in collaboration with Handmade Puppet Dreams. Toby Froud made his film debut as a toddler, playing the baby in the movie Labyrinth. He's the son of that film and the Dark Crystals films, conceptual designer Brian Froud and puppet builder and designer Wendy Froud. He has worked for Leica as a puppet fabricator on films Paranorman and The Box Trolls. Froud was the design supervisor on the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance and made the short film Lessons Learned in association with Handmade Puppet Dreams. Sam Koji Hale is a director, producer, and animator. His first film, Yamasong, was created with support from Handmade Puppet Dreams and has since been made into a feature film by Dark Dunes Productions. Sam continues producing for Handmade Puppet Dreams, working with up-and-coming filmmakers to create new puppetry works in the medium of film. Alba Annette Garcia is a director, screenwriter, sculptor, concept designer, artist, activist, and mother. She achieved international recognition for her stop-motion film, Time Space Reflections. In 2018, she completed the live puppet short, Daktoka Taino, or I Am Taino, which won various awards and is currently playing on HBO Latino. Alba is currently working on her 4th film, Dangerously Ever After, a stop-motion work based on the award-winning picture book of the same name. So having said all of those things, I would like to welcome everyone on to share the screen with me. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Howdy.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for being here. This is very exciting. This is really, I'm so glad we're able to present this sort of in the context of talking about Jim Henson's legacy, but really engaging new work and new ideas and fresh visions of what is possible through the mediums of puppetry and film. So it's really a pleasure to welcome you all here, and thanks so much for making the time.
Thank you for inviting us.
Sure.
Thank you. It's an honor for me too.
But before we start our conversations together, I'd like to set the stage a little bit. In a sort of historical context, right? So Jim and Jane Henson led the way for puppet performance on screen. They were the real pioneers, right? So puppets were a mainstay, obviously, of stage and performance, and have very, very long histories, and cultures all over the world have used puppets as expressive forms. Puppets made the transition to TV when that medium was very, very young. There were puppet shows on television as early as there was television. Often such performances were really just kind of stage shows that were filmed, right? They were existing troupes, or they were existing performers who kind of had their stage shows filmed for television. In the mid-50s, when Jim and Jane Henson started working, they were really the first to frame puppet performance specifically for the screen, designing puppets that made for good close-ups, moving the camera around, moving the puppets and the camera around in playful ways, and watching their own performance on monitors so that they could see what the audience was seeing at home, really framing the performance for the screen, kind of ushering in a very, very rich tradition of puppetry on film. And all of that brings me to this group of all of you. You're all artists who have made work very different from one another, but in very specific ways, you share common threads with Henson's legacy and his approach to puppetry. Each of you have work that's part of the volumes of short films distributed by Handmade Puppet Dreams. Sam, maybe you could start us off and give us a little bit of context around Handmade Puppet Dreams and kind of why we're all sitting in this Zoom room together.
Yes, Handmade Puppet Dreams is created and produced by Heather Henson, Jim Henson's daughter. And we have two focuses. One is to recognize artists and enable artists to create short films to express their puppet dream or their handmade puppet dream. So if they have a short they'd like to create, that short, then we help them to make that short. So that's one. The other is that we want to, we create a series of short film festivals that we show around the world. And those are shorts that we've helped to create, but also puppet shorts we found in various locations, especially on the internet, or friends of friends tell us, hey, there's a film out there you ought to see, check it out. And then we collect those into volumes that we show in various locations. So we do two different things. But today's talk and the filmmakers here are all filmmakers who have made individual films with Handmade Puppet Dreams funding, and that is an individual expression of who they are or what they wanted to tell as a puppet story.
Mm-hmm. And it really is, thanks so much, Sam, and it really is a sort of a testament really to Heather's vision and how she's continuing this on, that the works really are so different from each other. And in a moment, we'll see some very short clips from each of the works that we're talking about. But before we do, I thought it would be good to hear from each of you about, you know, why use film as a medium for puppetry, or conversely, why use puppetry as a way to engage with film? What is it about that that combination that is powerful, or that is a sort of a good source for storytelling? Alba, do you want to start us off?
Sure, no problem. Well, I think there is a warmth in the puppets, in the characters that we bring to life, from concept to design to the puppeteer's hands, and the soul that the puppeteer brings to it. Like you mentioned before, I started as a stop motion animator and director, and bringing to life something that is totally inanimate. It is the magic of our filmmaking. So there's a warmth, there is this magic to make sure that this character is believable, that people can relate to it, and that you bring a message of hope and understanding other people's or other the diversity of the world of it all. Mm-hmm. So I think that is the magic, the warmth that we are giving to these characters, and we immerse the audience into this beautiful world that we're creating to teach something, maybe to do some piece of activism, but it's basically the magic of and the warmth of love and the heart.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned, Alba, bringing viewers into a world. And I want to engage Toby for a moment about that world, because it really was these like fully integrated fantastical worlds that were expressed in the films Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, that were really kind of an outgrowth of Henson's earlier work, and that your parents had a large role in creating, and it's something that you're carrying on to the present moment. So can you say something about what you find so rich in the ability of working with puppets on screen to tell stories?
Yeah, I think the same sort of thing as Albert in a way, is that with a puppet you can tell many stories, but you can tell truths, and you can teach, and people can watch puppets and follow puppetry in a much different way than you can with a human. You know, you can show really hard matters, and you can show scary, terrifying things, and you can show beautiful things. And I think as humans, we're able to follow and really take those things in and learn from them, more than if you're watching a human do it. It's the idea of magic. Puppets are magical. They are inanimate objects that are moved by puppeteers. And so I know that Jim sort of felt that, I believe. Jim and Jane both, they were getting out of the idea of, a booth in front of people, in front of an audience, and using the TV at home as that proscenium. That is what you see a new world through. And I truly believe that. It's a magical device. We're all using them more and more now than ever, these screens. And so it's a beautiful way of communicating. And actually puppets are a wonderful way of communicating, whether it's stop motion or live action. And that's what, the films did. That's what all puppet, mediums and projects have done for people over the years, because you can reach a wider audience, kids and adults the same, at the same time. And you can't do that with a lot of mediums, I don't feel.
Mm-hmm. And thank you. The expressive possibilities are sort of endless. And that kind of brings me to your work, Raymond, which we'll see an excerpt from in a moment. The film that you made in collaboration with Handmade Puppetry is called Hitori, and it's you could say it's a sort of a non-narrative. It's almost an experimental film. So what is it? What is the possibility that that medium offered for you to work as a puppeteer to tell rich stories?
For this film particularly, my goal, part of it was to make a film that could only be told with puppets. I had made some projects before that were abstract or more direct, or just of various different forms, and I just wanted to really try and do something that you could only do with puppets. And I feel like that this kind of did that. It doesn't really work as animation or live action as well, just because it is exactly that. So for me, there wasn't really any other option other than using puppetry for this. And there's a lot of metaphor in there that I always sound a little cryptic when I articulate, but it's only because I'm far less interested about my interpretation of it as I am with the audience. Like, the entire point of this was to make a bit of a blank slate to engage the audience and have them find any kind of meaning, if they desired to put assert any kind of meaning to this piece, as it just being like a Rorschach painting, So there were some specific goals with this film, and a lot of them just had to do with things that you could only achieve with puppetry.
Mm-hmm. And Sam, how about you? What is attractive to you about using those two mediums together?
I think it's a similar thing to what everyone else is saying, especially the magic of it. That you can use puppets to tell pretty much any kind of story. It can be an abstract story, it can be a narrative story, it can be a story that's about a real historical event or something that happened in the past. It can be completely made up fantastical stories. So, it's another medium of choice, you know, over, say, instead of animation or instead of live action. It's kind of in that in-between place. Some people argue that it's puppetry is more animation. Some people argue that it's more live action because it's live puppets. And honestly, we're in a place where I think that's still being defined, because the volume of live puppet projects or films out there are so small that this discussion's still only in its infancy, really. Yeah. And so we're partly there also driving these films and getting those films out there so that we can expand on this conversation that you could argue goes all the way back to the early days of television, and what Jim and Jane were doing, and Kukula, Fran and Ollie, or other shows, you know. But yeah, I'm personally attracted because it gives me a chance to tell these stories that are, you know, fantasy stories that are also like Yama-san, which you're going to show some clips, is a little abstract and open to interpretation. So I like that aspect.
Oh.
Yeah, I was mute for a moment because my phone was ringing. I'm going to share I'll share some clips now for everyone, and give me 1 second while I set.
Me! I'm caught.
No te preocupes, abuela, no te preocupes. La unión está dando a papi compra para la familia. Te vamos a ayudar.
Yo sé, mija. Me preocupan los otros.
¿Sabes? Papi encontró señal en celular en Bayamón y llamó a Titi Norma en Nueva York. Ella nos enviará caja de comida también.
Ay, qué bueno. Yo sabía que la diáspora nunca se olvidaría.
Diáspora.
Boricuas que se fueron de la isla para tener mejores oportunidades de empleo.
Oh, ya veo.
¿Qué te pasa, Marabelí?
Abuela, tú dices que los taínos existen. Entonces, ¿dónde están?
Ay, bendito. Mira, hay una aquí. Nosotros somos taínos.
Let's go back to maybe Alba. Just tell us a little bit about I Am Taino and kind of what sparked you to work in that medium, because you're not a trained puppeteer, right? It's not sort of where you're coming from. You're working with stop motion animation. So I'd love to hear a little bit about just a really quick thumbnail about the film and what brought you to wanting to make it.
Well, back in 1998, I took a class, puppeteering class in college at the School of Visual Arts, and I started there doing some puppets. I mean, puppets, you know, kind of like the Muppet style, and I had to film a video about it, and I have to do the whole thing from pre-production, you know, post-production, everything, the voice and everything, but that was my first hands-on that. But my whole career was into stop motion. I have done some animations in stop motion. I worked for MTV at one point doing animation, but there was a hiatus where I was teaching animation to children and middle schoolers, because that's usually, I'm like very educational person, and I don't know, I just enjoy that too. But one point, after I finished my stop motion film, Time Space Reflections, I started connecting with a lot of people in the industry, stop motion and puppetry. And my friend Kurt Thatcher invited me to BAMS in New York, and he introduced me to Heather at that point. And we just started having this friendship, Heather and I. And at one point, she was looking for, you know, pitches on to find puppeteers to do the handmade puppet dreams. She, you know, I think the company picked 3 people to do a project with for a year. So she was looking for that person, and she asked me, "Would you like to do a film about the Taino culture?" And at that moment, I said no, because I'm still in production for the stop motion animation. I didn't want to be sidetracked on my projects. But 2 weeks after that, Donald Trump decided to throw paper towels to Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico, survivors from the hurricane. That was the moment that I just almost lost it. Okay, and I decided, no, you know, I called Heather and said, I'm gonna take on that offer. I'm gonna make a film. And I did not know how to make even a puppet now, because that was 20 years before that I was doing that class with Helen Rixford. She's amazing. So what happened, I started writing the screenplay, we shot it, we created everything in the house. This is my house studio. And Julio, my husband, created the animatronics. I designed it, and he created the interior animatronics. Even my daughter started helping doing props and sets and stuff. It's a family affair in this house.
It's a very, very powerful message in your film about Taino heritage, about the history of Puerto Rico. It's you know, again, we'll find this when we discuss the works that all of you have done. But this is not puppetry for children here. I mean, it's fantastic for kids to watch, but it's not pure entertainment. This is very, very rich, very, very powerful storytelling, and it's sort of unexpected in a way.
Yes. have a point on that. You know, let's go back to my influence. Yes, it's Jim and Jane Henson, of course. You know, like everybody knows that. But there's something about Jim. Jim had something that I admire. He had the wit, and he didn't have hair in his tongue, like we said in Puerto Rico. When he said something, he said it kindly. He said it humorously. But there was something to learn from that, okay? And I wanted to take that from Jim and bring it to the present. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm an activist. Yes, I'm a mother. And yes, we as Indigenous people were mistreated for many years, and we're still being mistreated. So that's why I took that from him, his activism, his education. And at certain points, I put some humor, of course, because I want to teach children, and I want to teach young men and women, but also the adults like me that were not taught the correct history. So that's why Dr. Gata, you know, for me personally, I take it personally. I'm responsible of even the most shocking aspect at the end of the film when I said the word. Yes, I said it humorously, just like Jim will do, okay? But it was a shock. It was a slap in the face. Wake up. Are you still a sucker?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really powerful. And those of you out there, I hope you get a chance to see it. And I know that it's HBO Latino programs it, and that's fantastic. The other films you can see on Amazon Prime, but I do encourage you to look for Alba's film. It is a, you know, the puppets are the same kind of felt, soft face. It's very, very warm, but it sort of combines this warmth with this very, very powerful message. And it really is, you know, I just felt watching it very much sort of building on that legacy and taking it even further into an area of activism that I felt was really, really, really powerful. Raymond, maybe we can talk about Hitori for a moment. And I'll share my screen and show some pictures of you working on it. And maybe Raymond, you want to tell us a little bit about the film?
Yeah, so this film was something that inspired, you know, I had to think about exactly where the inspiration came from because it's been in my head for such a long time. But it's directly inspired by two different things. One is I got my start at the Center for Puppetry Arts in Atlanta, Georgia, and they have a large theater, and they often do a style of puppetry that they refer to as Czech black or black theater, where the theater is all black, the stage is black, and then there's props and scenery in the foreground, and there's a curtain of light where you would basically hold your puppets into the light, but the puppeteer is dressed in all black, and it gives the illusion that the puppets are actually floating. And I've seen dozens of shows there over the years, and if you sit close enough, you can kind of see the movement of the puppeteers just out of the light. And I was always fascinated, especially when I was younger, trying to figure out, okay, what are the puppeteers doing now? Who's operating that puppet? Who's operating what? And so I kind of got this idea of like their own story, and I eventually became a puppeteer there. And when you are performing there, there's a whole different choreography that's happening, you know, in the darkness than there is something that's happening in front of the audience on stage. So that was the inspiration for this partially, just that story of the puppeteers performing. And then also directly influenced by the helping hands from The Labyrinth. So if you remember in the scene in The Labyrinth where the girl falls into a well and all these hands come out and try and grab her and give her the choice to go up or down, and they make these faces and stuff. And so that really was one of the big inspirations for this, you know, the idea of these puppeteer hands operating a group of people. So outside of that, you know, then I was trying to, once I had the basic concept, the whole arc of the story was, I want to make a show where we are fully acknowledging the fact that this is a puppet. Not that this is a character that is being portrayed by a puppet, but like, this is a puppet. This thing does not live without these puppeteers. And if you know that this is, and we're not trying to trick you and to make you believe that it is a character that's alive, like that's why the character gets dropped throughout the scenes. If you know that this is a puppet, this is an inanimate object, can I then make you feel something for the character? And so it's a little bit of a practical joke. I think it's fun. Like whenever people get sad in the sadder moments, I always kind of chuckle to myself just because it feels kind of like a, we got him kind of moment, even though it's not, I respect the audience, but it was just like a fun thing, an experiment. It's more of an experiment than anything else. And then on top of that, like, it was just the experiment of the process, I remember I pitched this to Sam and Heather years ago after actually I saw Sam's Phil Yama song, the short film, at Dragon Con. And I had the idea and I was like, yeah, the whole world is just made of puppets. They're like, yeah, but like the world is made of puppets? Yeah, like everything, the water and the ground, everything's puppets. And they're like, just send us a thing. So I had to like make a 30-second like proof of concept. And they're like, cool, yeah, let's go for it. And like throughout the entire process, I still think I got questions of like, wait, so everything is made of puppeteers? And like even my performers, like, and poor puppeteers, to their credits, they had no idea. I had a script. I had it best articulated as possible, but I couldn't storyboard it really just because I didn't know what all the bodies were going to be. I had some concept art, but I couldn't really fully explain it until it was done. And so they just kind of trusted me, and it was like, all right, I'll put my face inside of that guy's arm and put my leg around his hips and then have the puppet crawl on top of me. And it was like, no, it's going to be great. Trust me. On the entire time, I had no idea if it was going to work, but thankfully it did. So yeah, it really was just an experiment in whether or not I could get this image that was so clear in my head to actually translate onto screen. And
were there other inspirations for you? I mean, that's amazing hearing about that influence from Labyrinth with the hands. But were there other filmmakers that you were thinking about? Were there other puppetry traditions that you were thinking about and drawing on?
Yeah, one of the main things, especially like the clay dog, that was directly taken from, well, not directly, but pretty inspired by Momenshans, which was a movement arts group that we originally saw, my writing partner and I originally saw on the Muppet Show, the original Muppet Show. And they have this whole piece where they have this clay mask things where they're manipulating each other's faces to make different expressions, and they kind of get into this fight with each other by like ripping their faces apart and then rebuilding them back. So that was definitely one of the big influences of that character and just that concept. And then also, I think I was more inspired by theater really than film. I definitely wanted to be a very cinematic and very epic thing. Like there's a couple of like video games that I saw that like really inspired me of just the look of things. A couple of music videos that I saw, I think I showed to Sam too, of things, but like nothing was really doing what I wanted to do and how I saw it so clearly in my head. So it really was a collage of different visual styles.
Mm-hmm. It's really beautiful. It's really mesmerizing, and I think it does create this very distinct world that you're inside of. That really has no, like you were saying, has no external reference. You're in this space made of these puppeteers' bodies, and they are the landscape. And it is this puppet, this sort of featureless puppet that's making its way among the bodies, which is really just a very, very powerful visual world.
And it was also like, just quick, it would, my writing partner always jokes that I only make pieces about God or women. So this was definitely a piece about God to a certain extent, or at least the idea of deity and how we see deity and free will and all that kind of stuff. So it was an idea that was based on that question of whether or not we are in control of anything, and if that matters at all,
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think what's common to all of your works that we're talking about right now, of course, you've all done a lot of different kinds of work. This isn't, these works that we're talking about right now is a small slice of your larger artistic practice, but all of the works that we're talking about really do engage with these big questions, these sort of very deeply humanist questions. And Sam, I'd like to ask you to say something about the production of Yamasong. Raymond was talking a little bit about video games and was talking about deities, and I definitely noted some elements, some sort of gaming visual styles creeping into that. I'm wondering if that was something that was intentional, and just to say something a little bit, Sam, about the visual world you created in Yamasong and the kinds of influences that you're drawing on for that.
Yeah, so for Yamasong, let's see, am I on video? For Yamasong, you know, what it started out as a music piece. My friend Shoji Kameda, who's the leader of a group called On Ensemble in LA, they do this great kind of fusion sound of mixing Eastern and Western instruments. And I felt, I was like immediately drawn to that, because to me, my work is that fusion of Eastern and Western elements as well. And so as I started developing Yamasong, I started thinking of it as almost a modern East-West fusion myth, like creating new mythology with this story about these two characters from two different worlds climbing up to the top of a mountain. And so the character you see in the picture, she's riding on a mechanical bird. She's also mechanical, but then she meets a tortoise warrior who's kind of the protector of that world, and the two of them go on a journey. And so the short was really a story about me asking the question, if you're plopped down in the middle of a place you've never been to, and then you go on a journey, you find an ally or a friend, and then you go on a journey together. That's kind of an encapsulated statement about our life experiences. If you travel somewhere, or if you engage in you switch jobs, or you find a new friend, each time is a new journey. And as I preface the story in the beginning with Marcel Proust's quote, you know, the story of a journey isn't about seeing new landscapes, it's about seeing with new eyes. And so my hope through the story was to say, you know, you learn about another place, or you learn about another people, or you learn about something else through the eyes of another. And so I put that in a very fantastical world, but the statement itself, when you distill it way down, or the theme itself, is really about our own lives and the connections we make to people. Mm-hmm. And so that's borrowing visually from Eastern cultures, Western cultures, also springboarding off of, you know, Jim Henson's influence, especially the Frouds, Dark Crystal Labyrinth, Storyteller, taking that, the spirit and the feel of those, say, more adult skewing types of puppetry, and then creating a new fantastical kind of world where all those things live together in this new modern myth. Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in picking up on that idea of mythology, Toby, with your work. And you know, there is now this Froudian, not to be confused with Freudian, this Froudian visual universe that exists out there, that was forged by your parents, that you I'm sure you do work that is outside of that, but this film, Lessons Learned, that we're talking about, feels very much within that world, and it really almost is like a mythology. There's certain things that recur. It's a very sort of consistent visual world in a way, and I'm curious to hear about what was behind your vision to make that film, because that was about 6 years ago or so. So, and I believe it was the first film that you had directed. So can you say a little bit about how that came about and what you were hoping to do?
Yeah, I obviously grew up with the films and with Jim Henson and all of the work that had been going on, and also creature effects movies. You know, I grew up, and then I went into an industry, you know, where it was effects and not puppets, you know, anymore, full puppet films. There were, as we've all seen, you know, beautiful short films and pieces and art pieces, all sorts of things that are out there. But I was, you know, there was nothing like Dark Crystal or Labyrinth again, since really. Storyteller had happened, and it was amazing. That was a huge influence for me growing up. I just loved the visual way they told those tales. And that always stuck with me. It was always about telling stories in an interesting way. And so, but I create dolls and art pieces like my parents do outside of puppetry. And we were doing a show together as a family for the first time in New York City. And I met Heather there, and we had a chat about, doing a film. If I would do a film, and I said yes, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea what that would be. And it was, I knew it would be Freudian, because I love the Freudian style, as it were, my style, my parents' style. It's just something I naturally came back to in my career. I work for other people, I create other things, but I naturally come back to the Freudian look. It was, so I had no idea what I was going to do at that point. But as it came along, it started out as, thinking, well, I'm going to shoot this in my garage with a candle and one little puppet, because that's what it's going to be. That was the small thing. And then it got bigger in my mind first. And then I thought about, doing a Kickstarter and getting more people involved. But actually what happened was that I became a father as well. My son Sebastian was born, and what came out of this story was the idea of having to impart knowledge and teach your kids, teach people around you, and how do they learn? How do you learn in life? And that's what the lessons learned literally are. They're boxes. There are lessons that, one generation has learned and another has to learn themselves in some way. It really comes fundamentally down to that. And from the small things that you learn as a child to the big lessons that we all learn as adults, and that you can't necessarily teach kids. They have to learn on their own. Things like that. It was always, those are the ideas, but in a visual way, in a storyteller way.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you mentioned that. It feels very sort of organic to maybe to puppetry in general, but certainly, a common thread in a lot of puppetry on film and on screen in general that I'm aware of is that there is this sort of instinct for not just communication, but for storytelling with a purpose, right? And not to kind of make it pedantic, like it's about educating, because some of it is, right? But it's really about wanting to communicate something powerful to the audience. And I'm curious to hear from all of you who you imagine the audiences were for this. We talked a little bit before about, sort of carrying on Jim Henson's legacy and the legacy of the company for not, not just thinking puppets are just for children, but that they're universally appreciated, and they've been used to tell stories in cultures all around the world for hundreds of years, and that the same can be true for on screen. So who are you imagining your audience was, and what kind of impact did you hope to have with the work that you created? Either the work that we're talking about now or other things that you do with your practice.
I imagine it's storytelling in layers. It's what I imagine the old days of storytelling were like, where the village gathered around the fireside and the elders told stories, and there were parts of the story that children understood, parts of the story that were maybe over the kids' head that the adults could understand. But there was a lot of layering there, so that as you revisit the story through various points in your life, you find new meanings, or you understand something you didn't before, so that you're appreciating the story again and learning the lessons again, but maybe learning the lesson on a higher level, or understanding it as an adult now instead of as a child. And I always feel like those are the stronger, more powerful stories, which kind of runs counter to modern marketing, which is you target your 5 to 7 year olds and your 12 to 14 or whatever. I look at puppet storytelling as much as broader than that, and then it connects back to these ancient roots that we've got.
Yeah.
I would say for everyone, really, as much as possible. Certainly in the work that I try and do, you want to reach as many people as possible. It's not about limiting, I don't think. for me at least. I mean, that's sort of idea. Yeah.
I feel like for me, it's kind of the inverse of that, because most of my stories, specifically for this one, like I'm the audience. Like I'm making these, it sounds a little egotistical, but I'm making these films for me, and then trusting that that I share a similar taste and interest that other people would. So it does, thus making it broader. So I'm at least for this film, I was definitely not necessarily thinking about the audience and the audience appeal. I was definitely making it for myself and trusting my own taste, knowing full well that some people will hate it or just not get it or not care or whatever, but hoping that, enough people seem to like me, so they'll probably like the stuff that I'm into. So that's kind of just making it for myself is the only way that I can make sense of it. Because I think I might go a little crazy if I started to do that thing of like thinking about audiences.
Yeah, yeah. Enid, Alba, how about you? And I know the film that we were talking about in this conversation has a very sort of pointed message to it and communication to get across. But I wonder what you think about puppets on screen more generally, or about your work more generally in terms of audience.
My audience was for everyone, from every language and everything, even though it was done in Spanish. Basically, since early man, we gather on the fire. You mentioned the village, but I'm going back, way back in the cave and the fire, first, that warmth, that hearth. For my film, it was very interesting at one point. I was at the Smithsonian. They were showing Dr. Cataino throughout the day 7 times. And children, somebody mentioned that it might not be for children, but the audience was from 2 years old all the way to probably 90 or more. Mm. And the children were the ones who gave me the best questions. They make me think. One little girl that is not even, she's not Black or indigenous or Latina, she's Caucasian, that struck me the most because that important question that she made. The film is in Spanish, right? And she said, why did you decided to make it in Spanish and not English? And I said to her, when I was about your age, I went to see Back to the Future in Puerto Rico, where I was living. The whole film was in English. I did not know English. I had to see the movie in reruns at home to try to get the gist of what happened in the story. So for me, it was so hard trying to learn your culture and trying to understand mine. So I just want for you to understand that throughout the whole world, there's so many languages, there's so many cultures, mm-hmm. and we need to take the responsibility and the curiosity to at least learn other cultures, to at least learn their culture, their backgrounds, their foods, enjoy their way they dress, their philosophies. There's so much beauty, and we're missing it.
Yeah, that's really well said. I mean, what's super interesting to me, hearing you talk about that, is that there's sort of a beauty in the universality that working with puppets, whether on screen or on stage, can present, and then there's also an amazing cultural specificity that they can also present. But they really are. It really is this. There's almost like a kindness that behind it that animates all of that. And again, I would sort of tack that back to. I mean, look, if there was going to be anyone that was going to sort of start off the practice of puppets on screen, for it to be Jim Henson and his collaborators, to really set that tone of this sort of experimentation and wackiness sometimes, but always with this kindness behind it, is really, I mean, kind of amazing that we're still sitting here still talking about that. And that
I want to add to that. basically what that little girl taught me at that moment in front of 500 kids and families was, we need to connect. We need to connect. We need to inspire that curiosity in the children's imagination. Otherwise, we cannot change the world. We need to, when I was a little girl, I was thinking, my teacher wrote this, she said, everybody, right? When you die, what do you want to be put on your funeral, on your thing? What do you want people to talk about you? I want to change the world. I want to change the world. I don't want any more wars. I want people to understand each other, to work together. And that is what drives my work, basically.
That's beautiful. We have a few questions from the audience that I'd like to share with you guys as we get towards the end of our hour together, which went by like in a blink.
Yeah.
Can't believe it. There's a question from Sean, who is curious about the future of puppets or puppetry on screen, and what kinds of things are happening now that are just emerging, and what you see kind of coming down the pike in your experience.
I think we've all been working on various projects, but I think it's going to be moving towards just the blending of CG and puppetry in a more perfect way. A lot of the things that are coming out now that do heavily rely on puppetry also heavily rely on some element of visual effects. Shows like The Mandalorian, or even Earth to Ned, which is a new show that's going to be coming out on Disney Plus for from the Henson Company, or obviously Dark Crystal and things of that nature. So the idea of blending these two art forms, where they used to be such at odds against each other, is the way that it's continuing to go.
It's interesting, Kobe. You were right at this moment, right? Where you were a very small child around when the Dark Crystal film was happening. Oh, actually, you probably weren't even born yet when the Dark Crystal came out. Right. But had a chance to work on the Netflix series, The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. So your work kind of, in knowing what your parents' work was on the Dark Crystal spans that. So you're sort of experiencing firsthand what that future is, because that is very recent production and really combined classic puppetry with cutting edge CGI. You want to talk a little bit about that?
I mean, Age of Resistance was, unprecedented as a puppet show. Full puppets and not a human on screen, and it was amazing. There was a beautiful blend of real puppetry as much as possible on screen all at once, and then heightened with visual effects, heightened with CG. Whether it was to give it emotion further than we could push it on a puppet, on a gelfling, or whether it was a fully realized CG creature, or the backdrops. It was a beautiful marriage of puppetry and visual effects, and it worked. I mean, I think it truly is a triumph of all of those things put together in a modern age. It's a modern way of filming. I'll always stand by it as the way you should truly film puppetry and see it in the world. I think also what's been interesting is that puppetry is now, it was pushed to the side of special effects for so long, unless it was just a full, puppet character, it was special for something. It was usually visual effects, but now it's being reincorporated into film in a different way. Another one, was his Dark Materials that just came out as well. They had puppet proxies for all of the animals on that. They did that live on set, and then they had CG characters on top of those after. But that sort of stuff, puppets are around, and puppet performance and puppeteers are coming back, and coming into fashion again, thankfully, because it's an amazing art form. It really is. not only for building puppets, but performing them as well. And again, we used as many puppeteers as we possibly could on Dark Crystal and all of those things. So yes, a true celebration of puppetry, I think, is coming up and hopefully continues. We'll see.
I think it's all kind of coming back together, where there was the fight between, say, visual effects and live puppetry. Now I think there's the merging or bringing together of, I like to say that we're using all the tools in the toolkit now. We're not saying we're only going to use the puppets.
Yeah.
We're only going to use visual effects. Now it's coming together, and in a way that I think brings performance back to the front. You know, the performance and the characters, where we're not trying to guess what's in the green screen world, because we're in, say, like with Mandalorian, the volume, where we see the whole world and we're interacting with the whole world. And you'll see puppetry, I think, doing the same kinds of experiments that you're seeing in live action animation.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask two more questions. Oh, sorry.
I didn't answer yet.
Ahead,
That
please.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, so the way I see it, for example, I wrote a feature film that I'm thinking what would be the style of it, because right now I'm thinking I can direct talent like human live actors, puppetry, stop motion, name it, CGI, whatever. But the important part of what we have to do is, I think, the storytelling, building a community. The Mandalorian works because it built a community based on something, a piece of work that was done before, of course, Star Wars. But you see the community already have the rules and of that world. They want to, you know, they die for that community. They want the story that I want to create works of art that are community driven, that can last way before we are not here, but that our next generation can learn so much from it, and that they can continue it, you know. And that's so important. The building of the community is, and yes, practical effects is what drives my work, but yeah, the community building and what we have to say. We are storytellers. Our ancestors were storytellers. That was the magic. The first magic was on that fire in that cave.
Yeah. It's great that you bring up this notion of community, and I've said this before in these conversations that we have under this Jim Henson's World banner, that and I don't know if this is exactly what you meant by this, Alba, but I think it's true to some degree based on what you said, that something so powerful about these conversations is that they bring the fan community together, and also the community of practitioners who are taking, you know, some bits and bringing them into the future and sort of reimagining some works. And it's not just nostalgia. It's sort of taking stories and characters and understanding them and reinterpreting them for today's world, and they still speak so loudly to audiences that it's really not like this idea of nostalgia or sentimentality or just sort of fan nostalgia is not enough to explain the kind of fierce fan connection that people have to you know, to the Muppets or to the Sesame Street characters or Dark Crystal or whatever it is. I mean, Henson's not the only one who's built those communities around these works, but I think it's very, very unique in terms of its power. And I think you're absolutely right. The sort of letting that idea of bringing people together around stories guide you is really, you know, that's the dream, right? That's the most important thing you can do. Yeah. I guess we have to close, which is crazy because I could talk to each of you for an hour, to say a little bit about what you're each working on and what we can look forward to seeing from each of you as artists in the near term.
Yeah, so I'm working on a film called Joyriders. It's a film that's about 3 kids from the inner city who find an alien spaceship and take it on a joyride through Atlanta.
What?
Yeah. So yeah, this is a project I've been working on for some time, and we shot it in Atlanta. We did a big crowdfunding thing and raised several thousand, $20,000, and had hundreds of people participating in it. And now we shot it, and now we're shooting miniatures. The spaceship is a miniature, and we are combining that with drone shots. So it's all kind of a thing that's going to be a proof of concept for a much larger project. So very excited about it.
Cool. I'm currently working on Pinocchio for Guillermo del Toro. It's a stop motion project, and that's all I can say about it.
Exciting. Alba, what you were saying something a little bit about your current project, but you want to?
Oh my God. Woo! Let's get the right. Okay, so I'm finishing up my stop motion film, which is 7 years in the making because we only have 2 animators, Julio and I. So it's done in the basement of our house. So we are up to the last scene. So now it's post-production. So we have to put the faces on, the digital faces with the mocap of the facial expressions onto the puppets that we already animated, which is about 10-minute film. So that's one. I wrote a feature film that I'm trying to pitch to Netflix. It is a mythological, modern, interesting, mythological Taino indigenous, but in the modern times, year 2024. And that one for me, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And I have people, actors from my island that are like, they're the Raul Julia of the island in theater, and they're interested in being part of the voice of the characters. And I'm very excited because I never had a feature film done, and now I'm there. I'm doing it. Let's do it. I'm gonna do it. and that's it so far.
That's a lot. That's great. Sam, I'd love to hear about what you're working on, and also you work closely with Heather at Handmade Puppet Dreams. So I'd love to hear about what you're working on as yourself as an artist, and what's coming up with Handmade Puppet Dreams, what we can look forward to.
Yeah, that's right. So you know, I'm a producer for Handmade Puppet Dreams, so I produce the films with Heather with different filmmakers. So we have 3 new filmmakers every year. We try to make 3 films, and so those are all in various points of production. With the pandemic right now, it's slowed down production for everybody, but hopefully, you know, we'll be able to pick up and continue making those stories. And then for myself personally, right now I'm working on a Netflix show I can't say much about, but I'm on one of the artists on the show. And then personally, I decided during the pandemic to do a series of illustrations and make an illustrated book. So that book is called Journey of the Nod, which I've been posting online on WordPress. And you can find that at mightypugstudio.wordpress.com if you're interested in the new sci-fi story that I'm developing. So there you go.
Well, that's a lot, you guys. It's so great to hear about your work and your work process and all the great things coming up. I hope you will all join us again to talk about things as they're emerging from your practice. It's really been a privilege to speak with all of you. And if all we're looking at in the future is the future of puppetry, then I feel very relaxed. The rest of it, maybe not so much. But in your capable hands, I feel very excited and optimistic for the future. So thanks for all your good work, and it's been fantastic to be with all of you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara.
So much. It's been an honor.
Okay.
Thank you, filmmakers, for joining us. I'm glad
Happy
we had
Father's Day.
Yes.
And to Jim over here, and to all of you if you're fathers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody out there.
Bye.
Come on.